The federal government has rejected the European Union's final report on the 2023 general elections, denouncing it as a poorly done desk job. In a statement, the President's special advisor, Adele Alake, accuses the European Union of bias and unfounded claims. He argues that the elections, especially the presidential election won by Bola Tinubu of the All Progressives Congress, were credible, peaceful, and well organized. The EU mission presented its report on the general election on Tuesday, citing what it called enduring systemic weaknesses in the polls. It also identified 6 key areas for improvement in Nigeria's electoral process. The federal government's reaction is in response to the report submitted last week by the European Union Election Observation Mission on Nigeria's 2023 elections. Arise correspondent Punariman Benjamin reports.
Though it's been more than 3 months after Nigeria's general elections, the challenges faced during the elections are yet to be resolved. The election petition courts are still sitting to address several issues raised by aggrieved parties who are challenging the outcome of the polls, while Nigerians are anxiously waiting at the federal and state levels for the outcome. The European Union says the general election was flawed with so many irregularities recorded, such as voter apathy, lack of punishment for electoral offenders, interferences by outsiders during the counting of votes, and the intimidation of voters.
So while the 25th February elections were held on schedule, a lack of transparency and operational failures reduced trust in the process and challenged the right to vote. Voters assigned to new polling units had difficulties in identifying their correct polling unit, and the conditions in almost half of polling units observed did not ensure the secrecy of the vote. In 16 states, the mission noted incidents of violent attacks on polling units and indeed on INEC staff and harassment of voters. The counting procedures were negatively impacted by overall poor understanding, particularly in completing forms, and chaotic and overcrowded conditions in collation centres observed.
Some of the recommendations by the European Observation Mission includes the protection of voters in future elections, establishing a robust operational framework for elections, and addressing impunity through an electoral offences court. The Independent National Electoral Commission promises to consider all the recommendations as provided by the EU mission.
As far as we are concerned, we are going to present our report. We are going to make our submissions to the court. We are going to present what we know and what we did during the elections to the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal and all the other election petition tribunals, and then they will make a determination on going forward. But as far as the Commission is concerned, there were so many positives to this election. There were also significant challenges and problems with the election. We are going to address those challenges and those problems.
The EU delegation also visited the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, George Akume, and submitted a copy of its report to the Nigerian government. The SGF is calling for more support from the EU to promote Nigeria's democracy. Punaraman Benjamin, Arise News.
Joining us now is our Oladotun Hassan, a lawyer and member of the dissolved APC Presidential Campaign Council Special Duties Committee and President Yoruba Council Worldwide. He will be joined by Samson Itodo, a lawyer and founder of the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement Nigeria, YAGA. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for staying with us. Well, the matter speaks for itself. The narrative is out there. The federal government of Nigeria, speaking through Special Advisor Adele Alake, says the EU Election Observer Mission is biased, prejudicial, just 11 analysts and 36 observers arriving at some groundbreaking observations and making recommendations. But some other people think differently. So that matter is in the public domain. Let me start with you, Samson Itodo, and then Hassan. You also react. Samson Itodo, I'm aware that YAGA, also sent out observers, over 3,000 in 774 local governments. And Yaga has also issued his own report about what it observed. Is there any much difference between what the EU observed and what you observed through, your respondents who were on the field during the 2023 election? And what do you think of the reaction by Mr. Adele-Alake? We'll go with you first, and then Hassan can respond. Please go ahead.
Well, thanks so much, Dr. Abati and the team out there. Dr. Abati, it's Yaga Africa and not Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The EU observation report and the findings contained in that report, we have said consistently, they are valid and they resonate and they are consistent with the findings of civil society organizations as well as Yaga Africa's report. And so to that extent, we'd say that the contents of that report are indeed a reflection of the state of our electoral process. To your question on the reaction to the federal government's response to the report, I think there are four main things that are worthy of note. The first one is that the EU Election Observation Mission came to Nigeria on the invitation of the federal government. It is part of standard practice in this ecosystem of election observation that countries invite international observers to come observe the elections. And the observation of these elections is based on certain standards, and there are standards that are set in instruments and regional norms that Nigeria has ratified and domesticated. It's based on our Electoral Act and the Constitution. And so the EU Election Observation Mission didn't just deploy to Nigeria. It came on the invitation of the Nigerian government. The second critical thing worthy of note is that across the world, the EU Observation Mission is reputed as one of the leading international observation missions on elections because it's got standard comprehensive frameworks for assessing electoral integrity. And I think it's based on that since 2007 till date, the EU has been observing Nigeria's election, and some of the reports from the EU have become a reference point for reforms. If you look at the statement issued by the federal government, they reference the 2022 Electoral Act. And I think Nigerians need to know that that act that we celebrate had contributions from the EU. The EU deployed its technical expertise and its resources, supported the National Assembly, supported civil society organizations to galvanize citizens, including support to INEC. And the act that we celebrate today, had a contribution of the EU. From 2015 till date, the EU has contributed a lot of resources in advancing our electoral process. I think the third critical point that is also, worthy of note is the fact that the EU Election Observation Mission is an independent mission separate from the EU delegation in Nigeria. These are two separate entities, even though they belong to this family called the EU. The EU Observation Mission is answerable to the EU in Brussels, whilst the EU delegation is resident in Nigeria and it advances bilateral cooperation with the EU. So it's important to treat these two separately. And so those are the issues. And I think that, the response from the federal government, to an extent, I felt taken aback for two reasons. One, I had expected that the rhetoric from the SGF when the EU delegation met with when the EU observer mission met with the SGF was that, yes, we will take these findings, we will take these recommendations, and we would solicit more support to enhance our process, and not the kind of statement that was issued. And I'm quite worried and disturbed with the statement because there are certain, contents in that statement that gives me cause to worry. First, if you say this was the best elections conducted in our history, citizens don't agree with you. Civil society don't agree with you. Because look at the systemic weaknesses that they identified. Logistical challenge was a fundamental issue in this election. The issue about public confidence hurted by the issue related to the lack of transparency in the management of the results process. You look at different aspects of the elections, there are a lot of infractions. And so at this point, we should be true to ourselves to say, what can we do to improve the integrity of our process? But the 2023 election cannot be considered the best election in our history. And I don't agree with that submission, and a lot of Nigerians as well. I think the second and perhaps the last thing deals with where do we go from here? And for me, yes, this matter is sub judice, and there's a limit to which I can comment on this issue. But I think that the reports released by the EU delegation are a reflection of the state of our electoral process, and it calls for concern. And every Nigerian who is patriotic and desires advancement in our democratic process should look at this report, other reports released by observers, and marshal a way of reforms to our electoral process, because the report really reflects and resonates with our submission. Yaga Africa deployed over 4,000 observers. Other civil society organizations deployed countless of observers. And when the EU delegation, when the EU observer mission deploys its mission across the states, it also interacts. It also takes information. So when you say it's just a desk review, I think it's been unfair, to a key partner of Nigeria, and a partner who has contributed remarkably to the advancement of our democratic process.
Hassan, are you on the same page with Samson Itodo?
Well, I believe I beg to disagree in its entirety, because Nigeria is a democratic state, and we must give it to how far we have come from the colonial days till date. And there have been a lot of skirmishes that we have to relate to the 2023 election. There are no perfect elections globally, but the 2023 election has surpassed our previous election in terms of advanced introduction of beavers, advancement in coordination, and every other thing that has to do with it. So in looking at how much everyone invested their time, including the political actors, the presidential campaign, and every other thing. I was in the studio. We've discussed how much the temperament in the system, the insecurity, all other issues were managed through that same period. And we thank God that we're able to surpass that. In view of the fact that the EU report came in between the Presidential Election Tribunal, to me is more of a sub judice in its entirety, because I read the report, less than 100 observers, and we have over 170,864 polling units. What is the veracity of the content of that report, the source of the report? Maybe, if I might relate, some of this content might have come from Samson Itodo's Yaga, because they are on the same page. Not every Nigerian, majority of Nigerians voted accordingly to their conscience. Though there are issues across the East, the West, the North, we are all witness of this. But in view of the fact that the way and manner this report was skewed was to dampen our hopes and our democracy, in view of the fact that though EU is a respectable institution, just as you rightly acknowledged, but in view of this whole laid down perspective, it behoves on us that where we have credible civil society groups, the Nigerian Bar Association, which I'm a member of, we all saw how much we were all on the street. We all monitored the election. We all saw how best results were coming in from state to state and how much the results were announced. But the fact that there was a winner and there has been a loser, everybody needs to come on the table to sustain the democracy. And also, we look at the fact that I saw some of the content of the EU report, which I must put to the fore. There was a statement during the entire electoral process, and that was made by the vice presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Dati Baba Ahmed. From the EU's report, they gave blanket support to that statement that was made on Channels TV, irrespective of the fact that that statement was condemned as seditious, as criminal. From the position of the EU, they targeted the APC as the only sacred cow, a condemnable cow that must be taken to Golgotha. In view of this same fact, majority of all these issues, definitely we are bound to improve as a nation. But in view of the fact that we are no longer a colony, we must continue to realize the fact that appreciation must be given to INEC. We might not say they've run a perfect election, but they try to make an improved election by virtue of how best the results were issued. For APC, PDP, they had their agent in almost all the polling units. Does EU visit some of the villages in downtown Kano? Did they have every detail of what is happening in my own village? Did they have every detailed factors of how we've been as a people? So for all Nigerians, we must never be dampened by these negatives. Our country is growing. Our country deserves to be given the right support. Definitely, I'm re-emphasizing that based on what Mr. Dele Alake said, it's just the right interpretation that best suits what EU has just done. It's not for the fact that maybe we have the Labour Party, we have the PDP, but in view of what I saw, and in view of what I want all Nigerians to go and read, that report is skewed is too political, as far as I believe.
All right, Are Hassan, let me come to you since you raised some important issues. But I'd like us to talk about some of the details of the report and what the EU had identified, and each of them had recommendations, and perhaps you respond to it. And that is, number one, they talked about violence, campaign violence. In their report, 101 incidents during the campaign, at least 74 fatalities. Is this true or not? Especially since you're representing the Southwest, or you speak on behalf of the Yoruba nation. In the southwest part of Nigeria, we saw what happened with some traditional festivals, strategically, in some, as some would say, put a day before or the morning of the gubernatorial election, where some members who looked like they didn't belong to that area were profiled and asked not to go near the polling units. Where we had incidents, we had Jennifer Efidi, who was hit in the eye and had her eye bleeding from her polling unit. These are spots in the southwest alone. I mean, there are other parts of the country where violence was reported. Is this true or not? Because this was identified in the report. Because you say the entire thing is politically motivated. They also highlighted marginalization of some of people living with disabilities and how they were not well represented on election day. Talked about the participation of women during election. Talked about live transmission of results by are these statements false? Did they just pick these statements from the air to arrive at their report? And then to Samson, I'd like you to respond to what Are said, that EU, perhaps the EOM, perhaps got their results or reports or findings from Yaga. Is this true or false? I'll start with the Are.
Well, let me try to reiterate, and I'm not minding word on the fact that the EU's statement is skewed to dampen our democracy. In view of the fact that there are violent attacks across the country, from the southeast, even prior before the election, we are all witness of this. And these are citizens' violence attack amongst citizens. In view of the basic fact that the Lagos issue that you are trying to bring on the text, we have this issue that was also in Ajao Estate. Some members of the Labour Party lynched and attacked someone who was presumed to be a Yoruba person, maybe trying to campaign at the same time. these are cross-violent attacks. And the duties of the police are there. People are arrested. Some of these cases are undergoing investigations. And in view of this same issue, NBA's report was also there that rated the election as above board, that we are improving, we are not yet perfect. But in view of the fact that deliberate taint were targeted at the way INEC, and INEC gave reasons why results of the presidential elections were never uploaded due to glitches and their internal administrative interest. And the electoral law gave backings to how much and how best they can manage such a process. They have duties on how to manage such a process.
Just very quickly,
and they never violated any of
Samson,
such.
Do these things you're saying not affirm the fact that the election was marred with irregularities, just as this report states?
There is the process. The entire process had their glitches, but that did not mar the entire electoral process.
All right,
Nigerians voted, majority of Nigerians voted, over 8 million voted for Ashwaju, 6 million voted for Atiku, 6 million voted for Obi. So, and everybody had their gains.
Identify that there were issues.
So everybody had their gains.
Samson.
The Labour Party had their gains.
She's moved on to the next guest. Let the next guest speak, please.
Samson, please, your response. Thank you. Did the EOM get their findings from Yaga?
I think that it's important to note that, one, the import of election observation is focused more on the process, the integrity of the process, and not the outcome. We are more preoccupied with the process because if the process is compromised, then it will lead to a compromised outcome. If the process is credible, then the election will meet the integrity test. And that's the whole essence for election observation. And to your question as to whether EU got its data and information, the EU observation methodology is clear. If you look at the report, it is clearly stated in the report that first, the EU deployed a long-term observer mission. It deployed short-term observers, and you talk about the number, but that's field observation. The EU also does what? Interacts with stakeholders. The observer mission met with all the stakeholders, including the Presidential Campaign Council, of the major political parties. All of these the findings were part of these interactions. It also cross-referenced with other election observation groups. It's not just Yaga Africa. We are just one organization. There are other organizations who observe elections. There's the Civil Society Situation Room. There's Center for Democracy and Development. There are also other international observer missions, who also deployed. The NDI and the IRI, the Commonwealth, all these also deployed their election observation mission. But the EU has a standard election observation framework and methodology that has been tested over the years. And so we had interactions, yes, with the EU election observation mission, and the source of their information is not necessarily Yaga Africa, but there is a correlation. Why? Because we as Yaga Africa deployed over 4,000 observers. We deployed the parallel vote tabulation methodology for the elections. And we released the data. So when you talk about what the EU Observer Mission says, to a large extent is a reflection. So let's look at issues around election logistics. It is clear, it is public knowledge that INEC encountered electoral logistical challenges in key places on the day of election, for the presidential election, in the South-South and the Southeast, as at 9:30 a.m., less than 20% of polling units, had opened based on the PVT data. And INEC did also recognize that, yes, they faced some logistical challenges. The issue about INEC's independence and how it dampened citizens' confidence is also clear. We are all witnesses to the fact that during the last President Buhari's administration, INEC's independence came under intense and severe attack. The president attempted, in fact, he nominated, his media aide, who was notorious, for being what? A campaign merchant for the ruling party. But the Senate, declined her nomination for other reasons. But even this particular INEC, you see what happened in Adamawa, see what happened in Abia. And so all that the EU is saying is what we already know and citizens already know. And
Samson.
And mine is we shouldn't live in denial.
Okay, Samson, thank you so much. So I'll come back to you. I think you did answer some questions, and let me reiterate. What we're asking you now, because you said the elections were peaceful, were good, the likes of the things MC Oluomo said prior to the elections, you are saying that was okay for him to have said that, Abi? That's number one. Secondly, are you saying the likes of the things that were done to Jennifer was okay? No, hang on. Let me finish now. You allow me to answer my question. What's happening? Please. Are you saying that the likes of the Oro, they carried the day before, all of a sudden, they were cleansing the land before election, Oro that did not come out before presidential election, as presidential election didn't go the way, all of a sudden, Oro started coming out for governorship election. The people that were chased, our reporter that was beaten, punched in the face, our cameraman. So you are saying all of that is justified. The likes of the Labour Party candidates, people that went to campaign in Surulere that were pelted with bottles. And if you said there was a case where Labour Party attacked some other party people in Ajah West, please bring out that video so that it will be part of the investigation and everything. And I challenge you to bring out those facts so that we'll have fairness. So are you saying what MC Oluomo and the likes did were justified? Another way people were treated and beaten and the festival were justified during the election? And INEC not being able to tell us till dates what constitution the glitch. I will ask Samson Itodo. Samson, you are a tech person. We are both tech people. If there's a glitch, there's a report for a glitch that you should be able to release and say, these are the causative factor of a computer glitch. I want you to talk as regards that line, Samson. Those are the two questions to wrap up. Okay, number you, sir. Please, yes or no answer. Are those things justified?
No, I will not go a yes or no with you because most times, Mr. Rufai, you pick your questions as if you are political, as if you are aligned as a Labour Party card-carrying member. Sorry to say this, because I must put you, maybe the way I put it to you that Dati Baba Ahmed made seditious statements that are criminal in nature. These are electoral processes. These are citizens' value system. And in all fairness, in a cross of competition, everybody deploy whatever arsenals at their disposal.
So that was
no, I'm coming. The Labour
You've not
Party,
answered my question, sir. And I'm the host. I have the right to ask you a question.
I also have the right to also put you. I also have the right to also reciprocate. In view of the fact that we're all citizens, there are some certain things I'll come on here, I will have to condemn. I've come severally. Even the last time that I was here, I condemned some certain statements and I reassured Igbo people of their safety in Lagos. For the fact that for every action there is a reaction. When the Igbos goes on here, try to throw a lot of banters at the Yoruba people, call them names. It is all there. In all, even majority of these are theater practitioners, Nollywood actors from the Igbo side. We all saw how much they were throwing into the media, and it was more. And I must say, sincerely, Arise equally contributed negatively towards all those things, because some things were reported negatively.
Please prove it.
But
give
in
us
as much as
no, please.
Let me now come now. No, let me come to the premise.
I have the right to interject.
Yes.
I am the anchor.
At some particular point, I'm coming at some particular point.
I have the right to interject.
At some particular point.
You cannot make a sweeping statement.
I'm not making a blanket
about
statement.
Arise TV and not defend it. So
and I'm defending it to you now.
Give us evidence that Arise News was part of this. Give us the evidence.
At some instances, you on your own solidarization on media, you attacked the APC, you attacked...
Give us the evidence.
Just give me your phone. Let me just Google and I'm show much of your address. as a person,
Bring it out.
goes beyond attacking the person of Ashwaju.
Bring it out.
Goes beyond the way those
Can you also
elections
point out
were-
when I have attacked presidential
candidates?
candidates? Bring it out.
Yes.
Because you do not have facts.
I do have facts.
You don't
I'm
have
only trying
facts.
to put
It's
it
all
to you
lies.
that-
I've just asked
No,
you a
it's all
question. You
lies.
can't answer
now,
it.
I'm not saying clearly. Within Lagos, at the eve of the governorship election, yes, we had the presidential election. The approach, even the way Labour Party took that campaign then was more of ethnic bigotry. A reaction to that. You don't beat a baby and you don't expect the baby not to cry. These people committed some of all these absurdities.
Okay, we need to move on to Mr. Itodo.
No.
The question I
For
asked
me-
was the things
for
that
me-
MC Olomo said, were they right? But I need to move on
MC
to Mr. Itodo.
MC Olomo never said anything that is wrong, except when he was referring to one Iyachu Kudi or whatever. And
Okay,
that is not
okay,
even,
so let's move on.
we cannot take that
Okay.
as a blanket,
Let's
something to
move on to
sustain
this.
our democracy.
Let's move on to Mr.
please,
Itodo.
can we
voted
focus-
free and fair.
Can we focus on the subject?
Itodo, please.
Thank you.
The subject is the EU report.
Yeah,
Can we
that's
stay
the
with
level
that?
I'll go into.
Samson
into
Itodo,
that.
Itodo,
over
please.
to you.
Yes.
Well, Rufai, to your point about the technical glitch, Nigerians have been asking questions, and INEC does owe Nigerians answers as to what happened to the IREV. Yes, INEC has commenced its review process. It's taking too long to get more information following the statement that was issued 48 hours. Nigerians want to know what's the nature of this glitch. Was it accidental or it was intentional? And I think investigation into this particular incident would unravel the truth. Two key points that are worthy of note is the fact that this report issued by the EU highlights some positive as well as drawbacks in our electoral process. The report acknowledges, reforms introduced by INEC, like electoral technology, some of the reforms. There were new instruments and guidelines that INEC also issued. However, it also identified three key issues that plague, our legal framework. That first, there are ambiguities in our current electoral legal framework that needs to be addressed. Secondly, there are gaps, there are inadequacies in the current electoral legal framework. And then three, there are complexities. And all of these have provided us with a roadmap. So what I expect, the federal government to do is to acknowledge this report and say, yes, you have provided recommendations. We will, as a country, look at these recommendations to reform our process so that the votes will count at elections. And the third sort of critical issue, related to this is the fact that we've got a choice to make as a country, whether we want to live in denial or we want to accept that there are fundamental problems. And public confidence in our electoral process, has nosedived following the last election. And I think that the state needs to recognize that, because if it doesn't, the issue about political legitimacy and the questions as it relates to legitimacy will continuously be asked. And so, as a Nigerian and a patriotic one, I don't think that we should deny some of these issues. We saw them, we felt them, we experienced them. And when we trivialize these challenges, it's actually insult to the sensibilities of Nigerians. And these are Nigerians who determined so well, to ensure their votes count in the election. And so the best that the state can do is to say, we acknowledge these issues, we will take steps so that in subsequent elections, the votes will count.
Thank you so much.
Well, Samson Itodo, your point is very well made. I mean, there are lessons to be learned from the process. But as we begin to wrap up, let me come back to you, Hassan, very briefly, to respond to what Samson Itodo just said. And please, no interjections, no interruptions. This is a conversation. It's not a competition.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Like the way I admitted earlier that Yaga retraced the same page of EU's report, meaning they are intertwined. And that is the fact that, and I must also raise the fact here that we must learn to love our country. We must learn to put our country first, irrespective of where we are aligned as citizens. Yes, everybody have their interests. There's a lot of things that everybody have to key into, but some of these civil society organizations, which we all belong to civil society, YAGA does not have the exclusive preserve of civil society. We are also part of the civil society. And we are reiterating that the election of 2023 was conducted under a free, fair, and credible atmosphere. We are bound to improve. We are bound to progress. We've received some of the recommendations of EU. Definitely there are positive recommendations, which as citizens is part of our learning process. But we must also take it as persuasive. Whatever anybody's recommendation is just their opinion. But as citizens of this country, I want to reassure, let's continue to give the right support to the administration of President Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He's doing well. He has started rightly. What we need is to rejig and refocus our democracy. And I beg to explain that I will look forward to some other time to discuss a no-holds-bar on how best to improve our democracy and not yoked under sentiment. We need to grow, and I pray that this country will succeed by God's grace.
Well, thank you very much, Oladotun Hassan, and thank you very much, Samson Itodo of YAGA Africa, for joining us on the morning.